Hi, Peace and Harmony here with you once again, going through the journey of growing your self-esteem. What happens when you have been abused as a child? What happens if you've been shamed as a child? Your mother told you weren't good enough. You were shamed for what you wore. You were shamed for what you said. You were shamed for what you did. You couldn't do anything right. Maybe your parents were split against you. They were favoring a brother. They were favoring another sibling. They didn't give you attention. They didn't give you eye contact. They didn't give you a pat on the back. Maybe they gave you 3 square meals a day and a roof over your head, but we're totally missing in your your nurturing in terms of your guidance, your direction, fostering and loving of who you are, getting to know who you were. This can all be very detrimental to one's self-esteem. It makes it very difficult to rise up and prosper really through life once this has occurred, especially on a repeated, continual basis. And what that does is it fosters a dependency to others to others in one's environment or one's world to then reflect back who they are. So, in other words, rather than doing what one wishes or one wants without regard to being self-conscious, one is constantly working for something outside of themselves. Good grades just for the sake of good grades, shopping for the sake of shopping, listening to music for the sake of listening to music without it being very intrinsically gratifying to that person. So there's a whole spiral and a whole phenomenon that's set up when that occurs. And what I really want to do, not only focus on how it is set up and how that whole experience is created, but to learn and teach you how to identify some of those negative behaviors that tend to perpetuate that original situation, and also give you some ideas to lift yourself up out of that. Once again, some of the things that you need to experience are a new feeling or exactly a new experience of life itself, separated from that trauma that one had gone through. In fact, child abuse has even been described as post-traumatic stress syndrome or complex PTSD, where one has I don't want to say flashbacks, but almost, flashbacks of that experience where they feel so bad about what had happened to them that they just can't let it go. It still upsets them. It still makes them angry. It still makes them sad. It tends to overtake their life. And they tend to flash back to those situations, perhaps when they're talking to a boss or they're at the holidays, and these are all trigger moments for them. And it becomes very disruptive in life to continually be having to go through that same rut or that same cycle, that same repetitive emotion again and again. Um, Very painful, very distressing to the individual. And what we found that there are several tools to helping one lift up out of that. And the first is identifying when this is occurring and trying to separate yourself from the feeling, and I don't want to say repress the feeling, but learn to identify that that is from an experience of an earlier time, and that it was not your fault, and that those feelings that you are going through are not necessarily true and valid, that they were almost taught to you in terms of a lie or an unreality. The hurtful things that were said or done, those are not real. Those are not the real you. The real you has other strengths, gifts, and talents which are yet to be unfolded if you only have the faith and the confidence and will and trust and desire to help develop those in your life. So one thing I definitely recommend is journaling. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you probably already do journal, but it's important to journal and get out some of those negative feelings, get them out on paper, so you can basically assess the impact that it's having in your life. Next, once you kind of work through some of those, you have identified what you don't like, what was not helpful to you, what was not serving you in your life. And even though it's confusing, even though it's baffling, the one thing that should have been there for you and supportive for you is your family. They were maybe supportive in some ways, but not in some very fundamental, crucial, or important ways. And you're taking that void out into the world. So what you need to do is go back and almost learn to reparent yourself in terms of taking yourself into experiencing those situations that you desire in a more wholesome way. For example, going to a baseball game. If your family never took you to a baseball game, going out for ice cream where there wasn't drunkenness or there wasn't yelling or there wasn't concern or fear for lack of money. Oftentimes that can be a big deterrent to one's happiness is they were constantly living in a state of fear, constantly living in a state of lack, constantly living in, we're going to go to the poorhouse if we, stop here and get this ice cream. We can't afford that. That's been drilled into that. So, what I want you to do is try to unlearn some of those feelings. Take yourself out into enjoy some of those experiences that you've always wanted or you felt that you deserved. Maybe you want to go to a museum. Maybe you just want to take a train ride. You can do this by yourself. You don't have to take anyone else with you. It can be almost like a self-parenting date, if you will. I have a creative side to me, so Julia Cameron, a book, The Artist Way, is very influential in my life. And she talks about how important it is to take yourself out on an artist date and take your artist out and do something that is stimulating and playful for that inner artist. So the same thing can be done for you, whether you have that inner child, take that inner child out, take that inner writer out, take that inner sports hero out. The you that has been really striving for expression. Learn to listen to that voice and take yourself out on some of those activities and just rather than sitting and dwelling. I think that's one of the worst habits is that people who have suffered abuse, they tend to brood. They tend to replay those in their mind, not by any fault of their own. It's just a natural tendency of the human mind is to replay those events. It's been embedded in their environment for so long, and it's been part of their physiology and their internal wiring for so long that they need to erase that programming almost like a cassette tape, erase it so that it's no longer there and move on to some new experiences. That's tough when, your family still is around or maybe, continues those wounds. So one important thing, no matter what it takes, is to remove yourself from that situation. Um, I know it's a very desperate situation for a lot of people. Maybe they can't afford to be living on their own. It's difficult to just live with a friend or stay with someone on their couch or, God forbid, be homeless or run away. I know those are often urges, but one has to find a way to do it safely and in a way that you can be self-supportive. And sometimes getting that first glimmer of self-support is taking yourself out on some of those excursions. So one of the activities I want you to work on is taking yourself out onto an activity, 2 or 3 if you find it's going well, that you find is nurturing that inner child, that inner spirit, that inner calling. Something you've wanted to do, something that you've been making excuses that have been holding you back. You've been creating a bar, in yourself. You've created a barrier. Maybe you've repressed these desires for so long. You've been overeating, over drinking, doing drugs, hanging around with the wrong crowd, watching too much TV, getting into gambling situations, getting into compulsive, sexing, compulsive texting can be another one. It just perpetuates that low self-esteem. So my goal and ambition and my tool for you is to go out and try some of those healthy activities that you feel are more nurturing to you and give yourself a chance to be your own best role model. Until we meet again, peace and harmony. Love you.